Hello friends, we've got a brand new studio. This that's happening behind me is still a work in progress. I'm still figuring this out, so it may evolve over the next few videos. But I want to get to today's review. And that is, I've watched the reviews on this camera like Gerald and Dunn, Matty Hapoya, Potato Jet, Mark Bone, and if you've watched them as well, you're either going to run to the computer and place a pre-order, or you're going to avoid this camera altogether. This is quite possibly one of the most polarizing products I've seen come out recently. Now I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler alert here about this specific review, which is there is an opinion that I had about this camera based on all the reviews that I watched beforehand, probably the same conclusions that you came to, and then I got this camera and I actually took it bravely to shoot a 2-day job. You're going to see a bunch of footage from that. What I think about this camera now is very different than I did prior. So, you ready to join me on this journey? Let's go. I want to first address the criticism that this camera has received and where I think I align with at least some of it. I do think that Nikon is a bit brave to label this a cinema camera. A cinema camera, in my opinion, needs full HDMI, easy access to media, and a constant bitrate through all of its codecs. Now, Nikon has told me that they've made the decision to do these things to keep the camera small and light. However, it's a perplexing choice because, well, this is a camera with a full frame sensor using full frame glass, which is never light in any way. So shaving off a few hundred grams and millimeters doesn't really seem to me to be a logical trade-off. But you can see where Nikon is sort of in this precarious position. They could leave the word cinema off of this camera, but then it hides its greatest strength, which is Redcode RAW codec and all the color science that goes with that. Red and cinema are and have always been sort of tied together. So with one comes the other. But yes, in this particular case, it becomes quite misleading. Gerald and Dunn, who I know personally and who I have an unlimited respect and affection for, took aim at a few issues which I would like to speak to. Gerald, I love you. Don't take this personally. The bottom of the camera has a single /20 with a horizontal security pin, which, yes, is a bizarre design choice. Nikon was kind enough to give me a SmallRig cage with this camera, and I can say that using this cage corrects for the problem and really gives you a bit more room to open the battery and media compartment. Additionally, the cage gives you a proper hand grip, which the camera really, in my opinion, should have had they just done the media and battery port correctly. As such, I don't recommend using this camera without a cage. Add that cost to your budget, guys. It's super cheap, relatively speaking. My friend Gerald took aim at how soft the image was in ProRes or H.265, but I think that's a red herring, pun intended, because ultra sharpness really is not critical at all to a beautiful or cinematic image. If it were, we wouldn't be using 80% of the lenses on the market, and we certainly wouldn't be shooting wide open. And yet, here we are. Sorry, Gerald.
Come on, man.
In fact, if you watch Potato Jet's review, where he shoots with H.265, it's a great and very sharp image. All I'm saying is that if you obsess about the technical minutia and pixel peeping, you sort of get lost in the sauce. H.265 is a very valuable tool on this camera, and absolute detail just wouldn't at all be necessary in situations where you'll be choosing to use that codec. And in many circumstances, a softer image will actually make your video look better, not worse. This camera has an intentionally split personality. It is both a Nikon camera and a Red camera, but just not at the same time. The intent here is to use H.265 for vlogging or any other situation in which conserving media becomes the priority, like event videography, weddings, things like that. Switch to NRAW or Redcode RAW when you want the very best image, or some flavor of ProRes. Not a single review I watched discussed this one very important factor. Most, if not everyone, are going to buy this camera because it is a $3,000 full frame Red camera. The Super 35 Komodo sells for $10,000 Canadian. Okay, so if you're buying this for Redcode RAW, then the logic would be you're going to be shooting with Redcode RAW. And that means there is something else you have to add to your budget: media storage. My 2-day shoot with nearly no wasted footage, there's no interviews, no long takes, took up 2.5 terabytes of footage, which means that I also have to offline and online my project. And that means proxy editing on my 2 terabyte solid state drive and then online to my 5 terabyte hard disk drive, plus another hard disk drive for redundant backup. If you're shooting a lot of projects at once, that's going to mean that you might need to add another $1,000 to $3,000 or more to your camera budget in CF Express media, SSDs, HDDs, media storage, all that kind of stuff. So if you're not shooting Redcode RAW, yeah, it's a $3,000 Canadian camera. Shooting Redcode RAW, well, now it's at least a $5,000 camera unless you just happen to already own all of that media. It's still a hell of a deal though, because certainly as a crash camera, well, producers would rather risk destroying a $3,000 ZR than a $10,000 Komodo, or much worse, a Raptor. And one last comment on that HDMI. I brought my Atomos monitor for this job, but if you can also guess what I also did, that's right, I brought my full HDMI instead of my micro HDMI cable. Now, originally I was actually quite upset at myself about this, but you have no sense of how amazing the 4-inch onboard LCD is until you use it. Honestly, I think 90% of people won't even need a second display. This camera is at best when it's used without a monitor. So in summary, this camera performs best when you use it with a cage and you avoid a separate monitor, but you also need to beef up that storage media if you're coming from H.264, H.265 cameras. So now I want to talk more specifically about 12-bit Redcode RAW, because if we strip this out of the camera, well, it's just simply a Nikon Z6 III without an EVF. In this way, Redcode RAW is why you are buying this camera specifically. We've already discussed the media size trade-off, but it's also worth noting that the camera also lacks a global shutter red sensor. Instead, it just uses a partially stacked CMOS sensor, the same one found in the Lumix S1 II or the Nikon Z6 III, which many suspect is a Sony sensor. PotatoJet shows footage of the ZR against a Komodo and a Raptor. And you can see that the ZR is the odd man out. It doesn't match in the same way that the Komodo and the Raptor do. I suspect that this is due to it just not simply being a red sensor and not just the red encoding itself. It's close enough though that even a less experienced colorist should be able to match it fairly easily. But here's where I think Redcode RAW comes in handy. Think about the kind of person most likely to buy this camera. The price, even with all those necessary add-ons, is in the realm of shooters or creators who really don't have the budget or jobs that require something like a Komodo, a DJI 4D, or an FX6. That means that they also don't yet have access to the kind of jobs where there's a G&E truck parked outside. Because let's be honest, if you're a competent and experienced shooter, you don't really need to shoot RAW. You have all the resources to get the exposure and the lighting right. Beyond certain VFX requirements, RAW is just best when you're moving fast and have little control of lighting or make some type of exposure error, because you can pull so much of that back in post-production. Now, I'm not sure if this just teaches lazy filmmaking because you have access to just so much latitude, but overall, it can be a lifesaver to the shooter with limited resources to control their scene. A great example of this means shooting in the middle of the day without any light control. You'll still get a much better image if you know how to use light shaping tools, but at the very least, your image will have enough detail to reel in the shadows and the highlights in a way that no other mirrorless camera I've ever seen can give you. Okay, here are my final thoughts for and against buying or using this camera. I would skip the camera for the following reasons. Number one is if you just don't ever plan to shoot RAW much or ever. I think you're better with the Z6 III or the FX3. If you always prefer working with an external monitor, then it's not the best camera for that, as micro HDMI does pull out easier and breaks more often, whether that's the cable or the port. The next reason is if you just don't want to overhaul your entire lens library from non-Nikon glass. Now, there is a bit of a workaround here. If you are in the Sony system, then there is a safety net there allowing for use of E-mount glass through their adapter. Nikon did actually supply the adapter to me while I was doing my shoot, but I just didn't have time to really test it. So I'm cautious on advising it, but the reports are quite positive on how well it works. You'll always, of course, get the best results with native optics. And there's just, unfortunately, significantly less Z-mount glass options than there are with E-mount or any other camera brand. I now want to talk about the reasons to buy this camera. Originally, I thought that it just wouldn't sway me away from my love for the FX3, which is what I'm shooting this video on right now. However, if I had the choice today, I would likely buy the ZR. And there's another thing that I haven't mentioned yet but it's very, very important, which is 32-bit float audio. Currently, only a small handful of Panasonic cameras offer this, and you need the additional audio module to be able to use this in those other cameras. This camera gives it to you no matter how you intake the audio. If there's one thing that new shooters screw up, it's audio. And with 32-bit float, you can kiss all of those audio problems goodbye. Which leads me into, this is also a camera you can grow with. If you're a film student, you can probably afford this camera and a cage, and then at least a kit lens, and then shoot H.265 to the micro SD card until the work starts coming in and you can upgrade the media over time. If for only the reason that you will never screw up your audio in an interview or just environmentally for your sound mix. And I would say that I am the least familiar with the Nikon system. And I was concerned that some of the UI and design complaints would actually resonate with me, but they didn't. I found this camera to be the most intuitive of all Nikon experiences. Switching between base ISOs, toggling the LUTs, entering the menu, adding exposure tools, everything was comfortable and intuitive. The joystick worked great and never caused a misclick. The shutter button felt normal, and powering the camera on is laughably fast. Nothing stood out as frustrating me. All told, whatever negative things you've heard about this camera are largely hedged against by everything that's great about it. I think the camera is wonderful to use, and the image is fantastic, the best I've ever seen out of any mirrorless camera that's ever been made. You'll just have to decide if you can afford to shoot red on this camera, or if you'll need to instead choose the Nikon Color Science to save some media space. My advice to Nikon for their next model is just to not worry so much about saving weight and size and provide the tools that are necessary to really call this a cinema camera. But what it gives you right now is rather remarkable. For me, for now, that's all. Peace.